The future of domestic solar photovoltaics or solar PV currently sits on a knife's edge. Governments are pulling their support on small-scale solar PV, and the whole industry is in a state of panic, hoping to sustain what has been a mega-growth industry. While solar energy is a proven, effective and sustainable renewable, governments still face political and technical hurdles for continued deployment of domestic PV. Two critical factors are at the fore of domestic PV issues. The first is the subsidisation of solar PV by those who cannot access the technology due to cost or logistical factors. The second is the ability of the local network infrastructure to cope with multiple sources of electrical energy. The Solace Grid Demand storage and delivery system addresses both issues and will ensure the inclusive community and the environment will benefit from increased deployment. According to retailers, the primary factor in the rising cost of electricity has been the increasing cost of generation and infrastructure due to fluctuating use of electricity. This graph shows a typical day's electricity use by time of day. The area below the lowest point of the curve indicates the constant or base load. This load point is generally reached in the early morning hours of each day. As the morning progresses, we see a swift rise in use. We then see this drop off, a combination of reduced electricity use and the contribution of Grid Connect Solar. Towards early afternoon, we see electricity use start to increase again. As we approach late afternoon, there is a massive increase in energy usage leading into the evening when the population heads home for the day, enjoys a meal and recreation. This peak is exacerbated by the shutdown of solar PV. These peaks and hollows represent a major challenge to electricity producers and distributors. Grid demand storage works to fill the hollows and cap the peaks. The effective use of grid demand in New South Wales on current figures alone will eliminate the need for a 2.5 gigawatt power station, the associated transmission lines, and the pollution caused by the burning of millions of tonnes of coal. The concept of storage of electrical power is by no means new. Until now, this option has been considered inefficient and cost prohibitive. Solace Grid Demand deployment works in the same incremental way that small-scale solar does. The small inefficiencies in the storage process are outweighed by the ability to supply electricity when it is most expensive to produce. Even a small solar PV can make a significant contribution to reduce energy cost for all electricity consumers. Grid demand storage can be simply retrofitted to existing small-scale PV systems and will become an essential part of future small-scale PV installations. The ability to release a day's stored energy into the short critical peak periods represents a major leap forward in controlling demand peaks. Each grid demand unit is equipped with a timer and ripple control receiver. Energy generated by the PV modules during the day is first directed to the grid demand storage unit. Once the unit is at capacity, the excess energy is introduced into the grid in the conventional way. At the required time of day, the grid demand storage is released to the inverter to produce electricity at the maximum rating of the inverter. For existing installations, this may equal the rating of the solar modules. It is intended, however, that grid demand installations have an inverter capacity at least twice that of the capacity of the installed PV modules, allowing a doubling of output of electricity at critical peak times. This exported power remains within the same local area as it is produced, so grid stress is insignificant. Another feature of the grid demand unit is the ability to draw power from the grid during pre-dawn hours. This can then be released at the morning peak, further increasing the benefits of the unit. The key to the grid demand unit's viability is the relatively small battery capacity required. Our units currently employ lithium iron phosphate, which lasts upwards of 7 years based on a single daily cycle. Research is underway to replace the batteries with supercapacitors, a technology being greatly accelerated by electric vehicle research. The grid demand unit is supplied dry or less storage batteries to the solar PV installer. Solace will provide a network of service agents to complete initial installation, commissioning of the storage batteries and ongoing maintenance of the unit. As part of a solar PV install, the upfront cost to the householder for the supply and installation of a typical Grid Connect unit will be approximately $1,600 to $2,000. An annual fee of approximately $500 to $700 will be payable by the homeowner on a lease arrangement for the storage batteries and control system. This scheme will ensure the proper use, maintenance, performance and recycling of the battery arrays. For grid demand solar to be most effective, a generous net tariff needs to be offered. A net tariff will encourage owners of the grid demand units to shift their own use outside of the evening and morning peaks, thereby maximising their financial benefit. A proposed net feed-in tariff of 2 to 3 times normal tariff is both sustainable and attractive for purchasers. Under a gross feed-in scenario, a smaller feed-in tariff would need to be offered, as the incentive to reduce domestic usage at peak times does not exist in the absence of interval metering. A proposed gross feed-in tariff of 1.5 to 2 times normal tariff can apply where gross is already in play. In New South Wales, where the government is saddled with an unsustainable and overly generous gross feed-in scheme, the option to legislate the installation of these units to enhance the effectiveness of existing small-scale installations is a politically neutral one, as the existing beneficiaries will gain over the longer term and no retrospective legislation is needed. If the government is to prosper and the real long-term benefits of solar PV realised, we need to get behind grid demand storage. There are no losers in this story. For more information on Solace Grid Demand, visit us at www.griddemand.com.au or call us on 07 5593 7773, a development project of Vulcan Energy Proprietary Limited.